Okay, so picture this, right? You're in a room and it's electric, like buzzing with energy, and you're pitching your startup, your baby, to these venture capitalists.
Oh, I know the feeling.
Millions of dollars on the line, right? It's high stakes, pressure is on, that classic venture capital scene we all know.
Yeah.
But what if I told you that this whole world, it's got these weird parallels to something from like forever ago, like 19th century whaling?
All right, so you might be thinking, whaling, come on.
Yeah.
But that's where it gets really
If you're
interesting.
going to unpack this for us.
Yeah, so today's deep dive, we're going deep into VC, an American History by Tom Nicholas.
Okay.
And this book, it really digs into the whole history of venture capital, how it came to be, and trust me, it goes way further back than Silicon Valley. Like the roots run deep.
So we're swapping our laptops for harpoons and spreadsheets for like maps and whatnot.
Exactly. We're talking about those early whaling voyages, those expeditions, and comparing them to like modern VC funds. And the link, the thing that connects them, is this idea of long tail investing.
Long tail.
Yeah, long tail investing. It's a bit of a kind of jargony term, but it's basically the idea that you place a ton of risky bets knowing that only a tiny handful are actually going to pay off big time.
So it's like throwing a bunch of darts at a dartboard blindfolded and hoping one hits the bullseye.
Well, not exactly blindfolded, but you're right. It's about taking calculated risks.
Right.
Think about it. You invest in 10 companies. 9 of them, they might totally tank. But if that 10th one, if that one becomes the next Google or Amazon,
You're set for life.
exactly. Those massive returns, they outweigh all the losses from the ones that didn't make it. And it's the same principle with whaling, right?
Okay, yeah, I see that. Both are super risky. You could lose everything, or you could be rolling in whale oil or cash. So high risk, high reward, same idea.
Exactly. And that brings us to another parallel, the middleman. You see, just like back in the day, you had these whaling agents. Their whole job was connecting rich investors with these like intrepid sea captains who were heading off on these crazy voyages.
Okay.
And today, venture capitalists, they're kind of like those agents. They connect investors with entrepreneurs, the ones with the big ideas, the potentially groundbreaking companies. They're assessing the risks, figuring out the terms, and if everything goes well, they get a cut of the profits.
So these whaling agents were like the original VCs in a way. Instead of a fancy pitch deck, they probably just had a map, a harpoon, and a whole lot of guts.
And a lot of hope, too. But you hit the nail on the head. It's about identifying the best opportunities and then convincing people to take the plunge. But here's the really crazy part. Even the way they got paid was similar.
Wait, really?
Oh, yeah. Nicholas, he points out in the book that both those old school agents and today's VCs, they work on a profit-sharing model. Their earnings are directly tied to how well those ventures do.
Interesting. So it's not just throwing money at an idea and crossing your fingers?
No, not at all. It's about aligning everyone's interests, making sure everyone's got skin in the game.
Whether that's bringing back a boatload of whale oil or building the next tech unicorn, it's all about sharing the risk and hopefully sharing the rewards too. It's kind of mind-blowing, right? These old school whaling voyages, so different from the tech world we think of today, but built on the same like core principles of risk and reward.
And those same principles, they were actually really important for building the industries that led to, well, places like Silicon Valley as we know it today.
Okay, so are we sailing somewhere new for this?
Let's shift gears a bit, move from the open ocean to, well, picture this bustling factory floors, clattering looms, the whirring of water wheels. We're going back to the early 1800s to Lowell, Massachusetts.
Lowell, Massachusetts, like America's first Silicon Valley. Didn't see that one coming. What made it so special back then?
Imagine this. Mills popping up left and right, powered by this cutting-edge water wheel tech. They were cranking out textiles like no one had ever seen before. Lowell was this testament to like pure entrepreneurial spirit. But the really cool part is the financing behind it.
Okay.
The way they funded this growth, it's surprisingly similar to how venture capital works today.
So instead of investing in like apps and algorithms, they were backing water wheels and looms.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this is where the book gets super interesting. It dives into this whole story of Samuel Slater. They called him the father of American manufacturers.
Catchy name.
Right. So Slater, he brings the secrets of industrial textile production from England over to America.
Okay.
And get this, he partners with the Brown family, the wealthy Browns.
So like industrial espionage meets venture capital. That's a wild combo.
I know, right? But it gets even better. Nicholas, he dug up all these letters between Slater and Moses Brown, And honestly, reading them is like listening in on a modern VC funding negotiation. It's uncanny.
Wait, so they were working out term sheets and equity stakes way back then?
Oh, absolutely. It's
That's
all there. Take a look at Moses Brown's reply letter, December 10th, 1789.
got it.
It lays out the entire agreement, staged investments, money released as the company hits milestones, control rights, making sure investors have a say in how things are run. And of course, there's a huge emphasis on turning a profit. Sound familiar?
It's like looking through a time capsule at the birth of venture capital, just with more dot water wheels.
Exactly. And you see that this drive to innovate, to take risks, and build something new, it's not just a Silicon Valley thing. It's woven into the fabric of America right from the start.
So we've got this spirit of innovation, the financial know-how. We're starting to see the pieces come together, but we're still missing, like, the main stage, right? Silicon Valley.
Right. And that's where things get really interesting. Because even Silicon Valley, a place we associate with, well, garages and tech geniuses, has a more complex story than you might think.
Okay, so what's the untold story of Silicon Valley then? What were the ingredients in that secret sauce?
Well, for starters, think about the end of World War II. You had all this government funding flowing into research, especially military tech.
Right.
And that attracted some of the brightest minds to places like Stanford University.
So you've got the brains, the funding, but what about the risk takers, the ones willing to, like, actually bet on these new technologies?
Okay, so enter companies like Federal Telegraph Company, one of the first real success stories in the Valley.
I've heard the name, but
They were like magnets for talent, spinning off new ventures left and right, pushing the limits of what was possible with electronics and, well, back then, radio.
so who is the one backing these pioneers, writing those early checks? Who is Silicon Valley's first VC?
The book points to a guy named William H. Crocker. He saw the potential in these high-tech startups, called him Silicon Valley's first true venture capitalist. He wasn't afraid to back the dreamers, the ones who dared to think differently.
Okay, so we've got the government money, the research institutions, these brilliant entrepreneurs, and the risk takers with deep pockets. That's a pretty solid recipe for innovation, but something's still missing, right? What made Silicon Valley?
You're right, it's more than just the sum of its parts. There's something else, something unique, that allowed it to really take off in a way other places couldn't replicate. And believe it or not, even the law played a big role.
Wait, what?
Oh yeah, California, unlike a lot of other states at the time, had this law, Section 16600 of the California Business and Professions Code, and it put limits on non-compete agreements.
So employees, they were free to move between companies more easily.
Exactly. Now you might think, wouldn't that be chaos? Everyone jumping ship all the time?
Yeah.
But it actually created this environment where ideas could flow more freely. People weren't chained to one company for life, so they were more willing to, take risks, try new things.
Interesting. So Silicon Valley wasn't just a place, it was like a state of mind, a culture that thrived on risk-taking, sharing ideas, and, well, maybe a little bit of job hopping.
You got it. It's this fascinating mix of factors that you don't always think about, from government funding to, yeah, even the legal system, all coming together at the right time to create this perfect storm of innovation.
It's amazing how all these seemingly separate threads, these historical accidents almost, came together to shape this one small corner of the world into a global powerhouse of technology. So we've got this, like, perfect storm brewing in Silicon Valley. But we still need those key players, the ones who really shaped venture capital into what it is today, right?
Absolutely. And the book, it highlights three figures in particular: Arthur Rock, Tom Perkins, and Don Valentine.
Big names. Legends, even.
Oh, for sure. And what's interesting is they all started on the East Coast, but something about the West Coast, about California, drew them in. They could sense something big was about to happen.
The allure of the valley, even back then.
Exactly. And, they each brought their own unique style, their own approach to venture capital. But the one thing they all shared was this belief in backing truly bold ideas.
It's like the Wild West of tech, right? These three titans shaping the frontier. So let's break it down. Arthur Rock, he was all about investing in people, right?
That was Rock. He believed that the right team, the people behind the idea, they were the most crucial element for a startup to succeed.
More than the tech itself.
In a way, yeah. He knew that a brilliant idea, without the right people to execute it, it was worthless. He was famous for saying, "I invest in people, not ideas."
And it wasn't just about their business skills, right? I mean, the book talks about how much he valued integrity.
Oh, absolutely. He actually walked away from a really promising tech company once because he had doubts about the founder's ethics.
Wow, that's walking the walk.
Right. It showed that for Rock, character, it wasn't just some afterthought. It was paramount. He knew that building a lasting company, it wasn't just about profits, it was about building something with a strong foundation. And that started with the people at the top.
A man after my own heart. All right, so we've got Rock, champion of people. What about Tom Perkins? He was the investing in technology guy, right?
That was Perkins.
Yeah.
He co-founded Kleiner Perkins, and they became famous for, well, taking big swings.
High risk, high reward.
Exactly. They were willing to back companies that other firms they wouldn't touch. Ideas that seemed too out there, too futuristic, that willingness to bet on groundbreaking tech, it became their trademark.
But they weren't just writing checks and, like, watching from the sidelines, were they?
Not at all. They were very hands-on. The book talks about their investment in Tandem Computers, which was a really early example of incubating a startup.
Incubating.
Yeah. So it's more than just giving them money. It's about giving them access to resources, mentorship, connections. Like with Tandem, Kleiner Perkins, they gave them office space, helped them find key hires, introduced them to potential clients. They were actively involved in helping them grow.
Wow, that's a different level of commitment.
Definitely. And then, of course, you have Don Valentine, the master of investing in markets. He had this knack for spotting industries that were about to explode, even before anyone else saw it coming.
He just had that sixth sense for where the world was headed.
He did. And he wasn't afraid to go with his gut, even if it went against conventional wisdom. Like the book mentioned his contrasting views on Atari and Apple.
Right, he was all in on Atari at first, saw the potential in gaming early on.
Exactly. But he was initially hesitant about Apple. He wasn't sure personal computers would ever really take off.
Which, in hindsight,
Yeah, that was a bit of a misstep. But hey, nobody's perfect. And it just goes to show how much emphasis he put on really understanding a market, seeing the potential for growth before diving in.
makes sense. And even though he missed the boat, so to speak, on Apple's massive success, his track record overall speaks for itself.
Oh, absolutely. Valentine, he was a visionary. He made some incredibly savvy investments over the years.
And that story about him almost hitting it big with Apple, but then selling his shares before the IPO, talk about a nail biter.
Oh, I know. Can you imagine to be that close to a life-changing payday and
And to walk away. It
Hmm.
really highlights the wild ride that venture capital can be.
No doubt about it. But, even though he missed out on a fortune with Apple, his philosophy, his focus on understanding markets, it ultimately led him to incredible success.
It's like that long-tail investing concept we talked about earlier, right? You're making these calculated bets, knowing that some won't pan out, but the ones that do.
They can change the world.
Exactly. And when we look back at the history of venture capital, from those early whaling voyages to the rise of Silicon Valley, it's clear that it's a story about so much more than just money.
It's about human ingenuity, it's about taking risks, and it's about believing in the power of ideas to change the world.
It's about seeing potential where others don't and having the courage to invest in something bigger than yourself. And you know what? It's a story that's still being written today. So, to everyone listening, keep dreaming big, keep innovating, and who knows, maybe you'll be the next chapter in this incredible journey.